All right, everyone. Again, my name is Cynthia Hinman, and today we're going to spend this hour and a half talking about the Resource Sufficiency Evaluation Enhancements, or RSEE, Phase 2 Track 2 Refresher Training. I did pre-market sim training for this particular initiative back when we had our partial market sim last year. I think it was in September. This training presentation will have a lot of the same things, so you will see some things will look eerily familiar. And then other parts of it, I think we talked about if you were part of Monday's meeting where we had the implementation meeting. But we'll go over all of that in this training. I have subject matter experts on the phone who will be able to help if I have any questions. And this, as I mentioned, is being recorded. There is a presentation posted on the website currently in the Learning Center, the release planning page, and also the stakeholder initiative page. It's going to be updated. I made some minor changes, but if you're looking at it now, it is 99% the same thing that you're going to see in this session today. So the intended audience for this training, there's two main audiences. And the first is we're going to talk about something called the exemption, the capacity failed to start rule. And there may be folks who are eligible and interested in an exemption from that. We're going to go over that. And then second, we're going to talk about the low priority export tags. So if you're someone who does those tags in the California PA, this training will apply to you. As always, we want you to stay muted until we stop for questions, which I will do from time to time. After each section, we will go over the topic, and then I'll stop for questions. You can either raise your hand, and then we will ask you to unmute, or you can also put your question in the chat pod. And along with my subject matter experts, I also have Dottie Vance here, who's going to be monitoring that for me and helping me out if I miss anything. So we'll continue on here and start with our meeting agenda. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to start with the capacity failed to start rule exemption, which is a mouthful. And then we'll talk about low priority transaction, or LPT, export e-tagging. I'm going to run through the market sim scenarios that will be available when the market sim starts, and then we'll do a wrap up and summarize, and I'll show you some resources that are available to you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the capacity failed to start rule exemption. In RSEE 1, Phase 1, the ISO implemented a check of resources to see if they were online or not so that they could be counted for the next RSEE test, the Resource Sufficiency Evaluation Test. And the problem was that some resources, especially hydro resources, could come online very quickly, and they could start after we had done that test. So they were ending up not being considered in the capacity test. So they contacted the ISO, and we set up a workaround so that they would be exempt from this failed to start rule. So the problem that we were having was some resources can be available in that shorter amount of time than the timing of the check that we do. So we have this exemption. And if you're interested, well, first of all, let me talk a little bit more about the eligibility, because the last time I did this training, some of the questions that we got were, well, how exactly do you know if you are eligible for this exemption? And so I added this slide in from the last session, after the last session that we did. I'm not going to read through this, but we did add verbiage in our BPM explaining what resources might be available. So this will be available for you online, this slide. But the bottom line is, actually on the bottom 3 lines, if the resource is capable of running at 0 or negative megawatts, and can be online by the time of the telemetry check, the resource is eligible for this exemption from the failed to start exclusion. And that is if you are interested in doing that. So let's say you are. How would you go about that? Well, in the GRDT, the Generator Resources Data Template, which I have a picture of on the bottom of the screen, if you go to the Resources tab, you will see that there is a column for Capacity Test Failed to Start Rule Exemption, and you would put a Y in there if you are interested in getting this exemption and you are eligible. Then the ISO will approve that request within 5 to 11 days. So before I move on, I am going to stop for questions. I don't see any hands raised. Mo, Dottie, I'm so used to Mo. Dottie, are there any questions or any concerns?
I do not see any hands raised at this time, nor do I see anything in the chat. So I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Dottie. So let's head on to the next topic, which is the low priority transaction, or LPT, export e-tagging rules. So we're going to talk about the rules, but the first thing I think we need to talk about are scheduling priorities. So let's look into that. So scheduling priorities are a tool that the ISO uses to make decisions about clearing all types of market products and constraints. The ISO prioritizes export schedules based on how they were initially bid into the market. So as you can see here, we have ETCs and TORs. They have the highest priority, while economic bids and self-schedules have lower priorities. So in the day-ahead market, the lowest priority assigned is DALPT. Now, previously we used a priority called DAECON, but we should be only using DALPT. So if you have an economic bid, let's say, and you're going to tag it, you would use the DALPT instead of DAECON, which is something that we changed last year at some point. So you can see down at the bottom in the yellow are the low priority exports, and these are the ones we're going to be focusing on today. So if you have a low priority export that has to be tagged, it needs to be tagged as Generation Firm Provisional, and the acronym for that is GFP. So let's take a look at what that looks like on a tag. So as you can see on the left side in the market path, the product field is G-FP. It must be spelled that way, hyphen, capitalized, all that good stuff. And then in the physical path, you can see that the miscellaneous info field is a yes, which brings up this miscellaneous info box. The very last thing on the bottom is the CAISO _priority _type, and that's where you would enter your priority type. In this case, it's DALPT, and you can see there on the far right, there are the two other low priority types of RTLPT and RTECON. This is not anything new. This is in effect right now. You can see the note at the bottom says that this was implemented with RSEE Phase 2 Track 1, summer of 2023. So everybody should already be doing this. This is nothing new. Let's talk a little bit more about GFP. If you had questions about what Generation Firm Provisional Energy is, we do have a section in our tariff, in our Market Ops BPM, excuse me, section 6.3.2, and I've summarized it here about adjusting resources under certain conditions. So I'm going to let you read that at your leisure. Then let's move on to what the actual problem we're trying to solve is. With RSEE Phase 2 Track 2, what we're trying to solve is that the operators need visibility to the priority of exports. So when we're in stress system conditions, they will be able to know what is available and to adjust exports if necessary. And the reason is because we need to ensure that there is enough megawatts to cover the ISO load requirements, and also it allows us to fulfill those high priority deliverability exports. Additionally, it also allows our the other BAs to get a better picture of the certainty of their imports or our exports, if you will. So in this initiative, we're automating the ability for the ISO operators to see the priority of ETAG awards in ITS and make curtailment decisions more efficiently. So we're going to take a look at some of these changes, and then we'll go through some examples. So the two important tagging features: upon tagging submission, actually it's 3, upon tagging submission, the ISO is going to validate the tags immediately for structure, meaning we're looking at the correct priority type, product type. We want to make sure we're looking at the capitalization, the spelling, making sure all of that is correct. And if the tags have issues, they will be denied right at that point. But if everything passes that structural validation in the day ahead, we're going to be looking to see if we need to adjust those tags at 1530 and at 1730. Now, in the day ahead at 1530, we're doing that today, so that's nothing new. 1730 is new, and in real time at T-40. Again, we're already doing that today, so not a lot of change. We'll look at an example where we're looking at 1530 and 1730 as well. One other thing that I wanted to call out, and we will go through an example of this, if you did not receive your full day-ahead award that you initially tagged, let's say your RUC award was less, and you want to rebid the rest of the remaining megawatts, you should use a different resource ID or transaction ID for those remaining megawatts. Because if you use the same resource ID or transaction ID in real time, the tag, in the real-time tag that was in the day-ahead tag, you're going to get a pro rata curtailment to both tags. I will go through an example, and then we'll stop for questions. So I have 4 examples. The first example is a real-time tag. So in my example here, the scheduling coordinator submits a 100 megawatt tag. The resource ID for this tag, or it could be a transaction ID, just in my example, I used the term resource ID, is XYZ2. The product type is GFP, or Generation Firm Provisional. The priority type is RTLPT. So as far as structurally, that looks correct. The ISO real-time market publishes, and the HASP award is 85 megawatts. So what's going to happen to the tag? Well, when you submit the tag, we're going to be looking to make sure you've got the proper structure upon submission. And then at T40, the ISO is going to adjust that tag to 85 megawatts because that's what the HASP award was. And then immediately the FC should accept that adjustment. So that is the day ahead example. Now we're going to go through a real-time example. And in this example, the scheduling coordinator submits a tag of 100 megawatts in the day ahead. The resource ID is ABC1. Again, the product type is that Generation Firm Provisional, and the priority type is DALPT. The ISO day-ahead market publishes at 1300, and the IFM award was 100, but the RUC award lowered it to 80 megawatts. So let's see what's going to happen there. As always, we're going to validate that tag upon submission, looking at that information to make sure that it's structurally correct. At 1530, the ISO is going to adjust that tag down to 80 megawatts, and the SC will accept that adjustment. So this is happening today, so this is not anything new, so you should be familiar with this already. I can see that there's a question. And I'm going to hold off and wait till I go through all the examples, and then we'll stop and look at the questions. All right, scenario 3. Let's say we have 2 tags for the same resource ID. So we have day ahead and real time. So in the day ahead, the scheduling coordinator submits the 100 megawatt tag. That resource ID in this example, or transaction ID, is ABC1. The product type is GFP, and the priority type is DALPT. The RUC award ends up being 80 megawatts. So that's the same as our previous example. But then the SC says, well, I still have 20 megawatts on the table, and so I'm going to tag that after the RUC award comes out. And the resource ID is still, they use the same resource ID of ABC1 and the priority type of RTLPT. So what's going to happen here, and this is my cautionary warning to you, is in the day ahead, as expected, the ISO is going to adjust that tag down to 80 megawatts. But in real time, and then we'll look at it at 1730, and the ISO is going to adjust both tags pro rata to equal that 80 megawatts. They both have the same resource ID, so perhaps one tag will be adjusted to 60 megawatts and the other is going to be adjusted to 20 megawatts or something like that, but it's only going to reach that 80 megawatt level. So you want to make sure that if you want to offer that extra 20 megawatts in there, that you're going to use a different resource or transaction ID. And we're expecting the SC to accept that adjustment. So this is the exact same example, except if you notice on the bottom, the third bullet there, the resource ID is different. So what's going to happen if you have a different resource ID on your tag for that extra 20 megawatts? Well, as you can expect, we know what's going to happen with the day ahead tag, which is that we're going to check it and adjust it at 1530. And then in real time, at T40, the ISO will adjust the 20 megawatt tag down, let's say if the HASP award is less than 20 megawatts. And the SC will accept that adjustment as well. All right, so I'm just going to talk about these reports, and then I'm going to stop for questions. So once RSEE Phase 2 Track 2 goes live, this is a new report in CMRI. It's there now if you wanted to take a look at it, but it is not populated. Once RSEE Phase 2 Track 2 goes live, this report will be populated with your priority information. So I have a mock-up of this report so we can kind of talk about what is in this report. This is the RUC export schedules by market priority types. So the important thing to note here is, of course, we have the trade date, the SCID, the resource ID, and scheduling point. And then we identify the market priority types for these tags and the CRN number, if there is one, and the CRN type. And then you'll have the 24 hours and the megawatt values. So that's what that report is going to show for your RUC exports. There's also one for real time, same thing, but so I'm not going to go through it, but it's the same information, but for your real-time exports. Additionally, in ADS, you can see that resources could have more than one priority type, and you'll find that in the in the instruction panel in ADS. Daddy, can you make sure that everyone is muted? I think I'm hearing a beep in the background, like someone is recording this. If you are, can you please mute your line? Thank you. And this recording will be available on our website after the presentation. So, Just wanted to let you know that. So what's changing with RSEE Phase 2, Track 2? What does an SC need to do differently? The most important thing I can say is to act on this ISO tag adjustments immediately. So in day ahead, we're going to be doing the tag adjustments at 1530 and 1730, and in real time at T-40. Some tips for success. So make sure that you're tagging your, doing your tags properly with the right priority and product type, etc. Again, as I mentioned in the ADS slide, single resource ID, transaction ID can have multiple market priorities. I also call your attention to the 2 CMRI reports and the ADS instructions. So now is the time to open it up for questions. I can see here Mariano. If the tag is adjusted at T40, does this mean it will not make it into the final RS test? Let's see here. Looks like, Michael, did you want to jump in on that?
Sure. Good morning. It's Michael Martin.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and good morning. So we're aware that we say T40 the same, same thing a couple times. We do line them up correctly, moments or seconds or maybe a minute apart from each other. So it's just the way we use the words T40 all the time.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I see, Isaac, you're asking what the difference is between the 1530 and the 1730 DA validation. And I can think of 2 examples of why you might want to do that. I mean, the validation is going to be the same at 1530 and 1730, but let's say you didn't get your day-ahead tag in until after 1530. Well, then we would still have 1730 to look at that and adjust it. So that's one reason. And the other is kind of the example that I gave, which is that you are re-tagging sometime before 1730, and we'll have an opportunity to look at that at 1730 and adjust it if necessary. Amy, what happens if the day-ahead tags are submitted after 1730? I believe that, let me make sure, that they will end up in real time and will be adjusted there. But I would like to confirm that with one of my subject matter experts. If somebody can jump on, that would be great.
Yeah, it's Michael again. It would just have to wait until real time. I suppose that would be, if I could say, maybe a disservice to the sync BA not seeing it, in a timely manner. But there could be, legitimate reasons. One of the reasons that we could have late tags is if the day ahead publishes extremely late. Now, we looked back on 5 years of day ahead publishing, and the latest we did was around 4:30 one time. And so that's why we landed on 17:30, even in our worst case, an hour after. I think we'll add language that if it's really bad, we could do a manual execution of this if necessary.
Okay. Thank you. Michael, Chenyu has a question. I can see, are there actually transactions that could be defined in the real-time market that are not DA LPT, RT LPT, RT Econ, for which this rule is meaningful? You're talking about the validation? Is that the rule that you're talking about, the adjustment? Can you be a little more specific?
Cynthia, I asked a question to ask me. I will have to wait until he can, because I actually didn't quite understand the question. That's why I put it in the chat. Let me ask that,
Okay.
but I do have another question.
What's that?
Yeah, when you mentioned the CMI report during the training, did you say we have to wait till when we see the production in order to see some data?
Oh, I should qualify that. I believe in Market Sim you'll be able to see data as well.
Okay, good to know.
But right now you can't see anything.
Okay, I'll come back to you when I clarify that. So you're asking whether that it's applied to the rule?
I'm not sure what it says for which this rule is meaningful, and I want to be clear on what that means, what rule. So if you could clarify that, let me know. And if not, you always can submit a city ticket and we'll get you that answer.
Okay, so I think the rule it's meaningful. This rule it's referring to denial. I believe if it's so under the product of GF, then if any of the resource, any of the product type, it's not that they had low priority real time LPT or RT econ, that it will be, the rule is that it will be denial. I believe this is the rule that it's referring to. Yeah.
And maybe we'll be able to answer that question when we look at the Market Sim scenarios. But generally speaking, and I'm not sure if this quite answers your question, but maybe it does. If it's GFP, if it's generation firm provisional, there's only the 3 types that you have listed there: DALPT, RTLPT, and RT-Econ that are applied to GFP.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that in the scenarios.
Great, thanks. If I have any questions from our SME clarification, I come back. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We've got some hands raised. Dave, you can unmute your line and ask your question.
Hi, Cynthia. It's Dave Severick with ACES. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Appreciate this presentation. I have a couple of questions. The first is in regards to the pro rata adjustments. Considering the priority type is different on the real-time tag, can you provide an explanation why the ISO is requiring a different resource ID for the tags?
I cannot, but perhaps one of my SMEs knows the answer to that question. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anyone jumping on, so I will have to get back to you on that one. Great question.
Okay, follow-up question then. Can the tag be submitted after 1730 with the same resource ID without being adjusted pro rata?
I will, again, I'll get back to you on those two. In fact, I will send these answers out to everyone as well. So let me check into that.
Okay, thank you. And then one final question, if I could.
Sure.
You said that the tags need to be adjusted immediately. That's open to interpretation. Is a better way to phrase that perhaps as soon as practicable, or is there a timing requirement around that? I mean, immediately could be 5 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 minutes. I just trying to get a better idea of what the term immediately is.
I agree with you, Dave. So immediately is the terminology that we've been using, and I know in our last meeting on Monday, somebody said, well, what if it's 2 minutes later? And the answer was that'd probably be okay. So I don't know what the actual, I think as soon as practicable is probably a good rule of thumb.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, Cynthia, this is Eric. I don't know, Dave, if you can repeat definitely the first question. I think the second question, I understand you said, can you adjust after or create a tag after. Is that what you're saying, after the T minus 40?
No, sorry, I'm talking about after the RUC clears. There's two different timeframes. There's the 1530 adjustments and then the newly established 1730 adjustments. The way I understand it, is if the tag is the new tag, the real-time tag with the lower priority is on the same resource ID, it will be adjusted pro rata. So my first question was, why is that? And then my second question is, if that tag is submitted after the 1730 adjustment timeframe on the same resource ID, will it still be adjusted pro rata, or will it be considered accepted and not subject to adjustment?
So it's Michael. Let me answer a little bit here. So the adjustment, just so we're clear what we're doing, we're taking the tag that was submitted prior. Let's say it's based upon your self-schedule, what cleared IFM, 100 megawatts, and for example, and then RUC says, RUC comes across with the assessment on the load forecast and says it has to be 80 megawatts. So there's an adjustment there. RUC is the ISO's reliability process. Every BA has a process to manage their imports and exports, right? So in this case, the RUC adjustment is saying this is what we feel is correct for our BA. So the adjustment is something we said in the BPM. You should do. You need to really do it. We are doing the adjustment if you, I think the exact words, should you fail to adjust the tag to the RUC award, we will do it unilaterally. Meaning we asked you to do it, now we'll do it. So the question, or the point of this is, it's something we're doing because it's our BA. So it's not a pro rata, it's just adjusting to what we believe is the reliability assessment. Does that kind of answer the question?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I was going to say, I think what he was asking is, in my example, and I will go up to, let's see if I can get back up there. In this example, and maybe Eric can chime in on this. If we have, what's the previous example here? Here we have a tag, two tags. They have the same resource ID and they are adjusted pro rata. So the first question is why does it have to have a different resource ID than the first tag? And then the second question was, what happens if I put the tag in after 1730 is with the same resource ID? Is it still going to be adjusted pro rata? And I'm wondering if, Eric, can you address that?
Well, that would be addressed at the next time. It would be halved. Those tags would get adjusted down, and I'm not quite sure. I'm kind of I don't know. It's the resource ID at 1530. We're talking a single resource ID, right? With the day-ahead LPT award at this point, right? At that point, at that point you have one tag, one resource ID with a RUC award at 80 megawatts, and it gets reduced to 80 megawatts, assuming that they had tagged it to 100. Right.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, Dave, why don't I take this back? We'll clarify it. I'll update the presentation if necessary, or at least put more explanation in there, and I'll make sure everybody gets an answer to both of your questions. How's that?
That's great. Thank you, Cynthia.
All right. Okay, I see that Mariano has a question. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. This is Mariano from BPA. I just wanted to follow up on the question that I submitted in the chat. So I think the last training I attended on this, the timeline of the adjustment was going to be by T minus 57. And now I'm seeing it's at T minus 40.
That's
So I just
correct.
want to make sure. Okay, so does that mean that the adjustment would not make it into the RS test itself? Because if the test is
It
running.
would it's going to happen after at T40. So anything before that, it could be structurally tested, but it won't be adjusted until T40 if necessary.
Great. So the way I'm seeing it is it would not, the adjustment would not affect, for example, the balancing test. It would not be
right.
reflected.
If the test happens before T40, it won't be adjusted yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I don't see any other hands raised. Oh, Amy, in the chat, will different reasons for adjustments be listed on the tags so participants know why they are being adjusted? I think if you look at the reports that we're going to be providing, that's where you might see your answer. I'm not sure if we're specifically going to provide reasons on the tags regarding the adjustments. I don't know. Can someone on our side answer that question? So it seems like the reason in the reasons in the day ahead again could be because of the RUC adjustment. And I think that I can't think of another reason. Now, if they're, if the structural, if upon submission you have structural edits, that would be different. But in the day ahead, we're going to be looking at the RUC award. So that's where you would, if you see what your RUC award is, you could see why the tag was adjusted. In real time, again, it would be the HASP award. Does that help, Amy? Can't wait to see if Amy has any further questions. Ken, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
I do. Ken Sullivan with Tacoma Power. I had a question about the post-HASP adjustment, the T40 adjustment. Does that show up as a scheduled deviation since we are deviating from the binding base schedule submission at T55 and there's a tag adjustment even though it's low priority? Does that show up as a base schedule deviation and therefore a settlement charge?
Does someone have the answer to that question? I want to say that no, I don't think there would be a settlement adjustment, but I'm going to have to follow up on that to make sure. I think because we're adjusting it, that it wouldn't be like a deviation, but I am not 100% sure, so I will find out and make sure that we let everyone know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I don't see other questions, and I don't see any other questions in the chat unless I missed something. I'm going to check in with
Hi, Cynthia. This is
Elena
Elena from PG&E. My colleague Chinyu asked a question regarding the transactions. So what she meant was, are there actually any transactions that will be denied in the real-time market that does not fall under DALPT, RTLPT, and RTECON category?
So a can I, let me just hold that question until we go through the market sim scenarios.
Oh,
and
great.
then you'll be able to test that out. But
Sure.
I think, you know, we're focusing on the low priority exports, and there are only those 3 transactions, priority types, I would say. So I think others will be denied, but again, I know there is a scenario where we go through that.
So
Okay.
quick question. If you're saying other transactions, what are these other transactions? What comes under other?
Well, the other, let's say you put in a high priority product type like RTPT with a product code of GFP. That is not a generation firm provisional product type. If it's GFP, we're going to be looking for the 3, the DALPT, RTLPT, and RTECON product priority types.
Okay, so RTPT, if it's RTPT, then it will be denied. That's what you mean, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, and again, thanks, Selena. And again, we'll go through that a little bit in the scenarios as well.
Great. I will wait for the scenarios to come. Thank you, Cynthia.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? Saurabh? Did you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, Cynthia. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I wanted to follow up with, the question I think was raised by BPA, and maybe make sure my understanding is correct. So the adjustment's going to happen at T minus 40. I know the, our bank smart system or OETI system picks up tags to create the base schedules, right, for the T minus 40 run. So are we saying that the T minus 40 base schedule run may run without the adjustment? Is that correct? Did I understand it right?
I believe, well, let me, Jamil, do you want to jump on and answer this question?
Hey, Cindy. Yeah, this is Jamil. So Saurabh, it really depends on when the adjustments are made. The T40 is when we make an adjustment, but say, for example, an award goes out from HASP that is less or scheduled. If the merchant, if the marketer picks up the award and adjusts the tag, that would show up pre-T minus 40. And depending on the time they do it, so say they have publishes, I think 59 after, and the marketer picks her up right away and adjusts the tag, then the process that OD has for WEIM would pick it up and update the base schedules by T55. If the marketer does not pick it up and it gets auto-adjusted at T40, that might, depending on how fast it happens, where the marketer accepts the adjustments and everybody on the tag accepts it, and so the tag gets updated, and then the schedule gets updated, that might only be reflected in the RTSI.
Yes, so that's what where I was coming from is, so if you know so there's a high probability, or most likely what will happen is then if we let the auto adjustment kick in, that if nobody updated or just accepted the tag or updated the tag, the T minus 40 adjustment most likely will not make the RTBS3 run, right? Because as you stated, OETI is going to pick up. I have to check what our timing is, but probably a minute before that to create the base schedules. So that base schedule created at T minus 41. Yeah, I always have to struggle with the clock. T minus 41 will not have the auto adjustment, and then the base schedule submitted to CAISO will not have that adjustment, right?
Well, so the base schedule, yeah, correct. That would not have it. And so the balancing, and technically you might not want to include it in the base schedule if you're getting it at 41 because you don't want an adjustment of an import to the WEIM area, an export from CAISO, to be impacted at T41 because that might not give you enough time to adjust other changes. And so it might create an inadvertent failure just because of timing on the balancing test. But the flex and the bid capacity do use the interchange data, the RTSI information, the most updated. And so that would be a little bit different as far as generation. And that would have the megawatts be part of the RTSI. And so as you get closer between FMM and RTD, it would adjust correctly. And then FMM and RTD would have to redispatch in order to account for the difference between what was seen as at RTSI at T40 versus the actual adjusted RTSI.
Yes, thank you. That's helpful. I know it's training and not design discussion, but I don't know. I don't something for team to think about is I don't know. Is there a settlement impact to us for that? Like if the base schedule is different from the RTSI, and then also is there any? Have you guys considered if there is any value in moving the auto adjustment to like T-41 or like give it some time before the BS run?
As far as settlement impact, this is no different than it would be today, because today there would be an adjustment at T40 from what we do today, and if the adjustment is accepted, you do end up seeing that as a deviation from your base schedule. Mm-hmm. And so settlement impact should be very like how it is today. Having it be, so for example, earlier, then we're talking about it, then that would open the question, would there be a settlement impact? Because if it was earlier that we adjusted and you guys did make the adjustment, then I would open up the question as, okay, some things are changing from today's status quo, and so there would be more impact to what happened in settlements today. Not saying making it earlier is not good or not bad, so I'm not giving an opinion on that portion. But the settlement impact is minimal to none by having it the way that Cindy's explaining it. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate the answer.
Okay. No, thanks for the question. That's it's good detail to know. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. I see that. So first of all, Dennis had a question about slide 12 saying that LPT exports can be curtailed during the EEA3 condition. Is it possible that LPT tags can be curtailed during an EEA1 or EEA2 declared by the ISO? So it does not have to be an EEA3 condition for tags to be adjusted. And there is a resource that is in the resource section of this training that talks about why we would curtail or adjust tags, and I'll point you to that resource. It's a Q&A an FAQ that we put together a while back on the export questions, the tagging questions. So that'll give you a little more detail. Then Jordan asked, what occurs if the SC does not accept the adjustment? Well, the understanding that was given to me is that the web tag systems or whatever systems you have on your end, if you do not actively do something, they will accept the tags. And if that is not the case, then they will just move on from day ahead to real time, and then ultimately we're just going to be monitoring and seeing what happens if this ends up being something that happens quite often. So that's what's going on with that right now. I do not see any other questions
So this is Eric. This is Eric. If is the question whether or not what happens if they don't accept the adjustment?
So the way I'm reading this is if at 1530 you get an adjustment, and I've been emphasizing that the SC needs to accept that adjustment, and at 1730 and at T40, and I believe the question is, well, what if we don't accept it? What if we do nothing?
Okay, doing nothing. I mean, your system's gonna be set up to do something because there's a timeline to it. So you're gonna either passively deny or passively approve. So to the extent you passively denied, it's gonna go back to what you had tagged originally, but then it's gonna run again in the hash, and you'll get another attempt will be made to adjust your tag, and then to the extent that one's denied, it's a very high likelihood that you'll show as being over your awards and get curtailed at T minus somewhere after T minus 20.
Thanks, Eric. Dennis, does that answer your question? Or Jordan, excuse me. I had Jonathan on my mind. All right. I don't see any other questions or hands raised. Debbie, can you confirm that for me?
Yes, I can confirm.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's go on and talk a little bit about the market sim. The market simulation is scheduled to start mid-March to mid-April. And after the market sim results are available, we'll determine an implementation date, so you'll be able to hear more about that. We are aiming for pre-summer. So I would encourage you to listen in to the release user group, the RUG call, or the Market Sim forum to get more details. So let's move on. So I encourage you to register to participate in the Market Sim at marketsim@caiso.com. By doing that, we know that you are going to participate in the Market Sim, and also you will be part of our email list when there are updates to Market Sim, timelines, outages, etc. So you'll want to sign up for that. And also, as I mentioned before, please attend those Market Sim forum calls. They're on Mondays and Thursdays. And we will not only be talking about this release, but we will also be covering all the releases that are coming up and all the things that are going to be in Market Sim or are currently in Market Sim. And then, of course, if you have questions, you can submit them via the city application. So I'm going to go through two scenarios. I'll stop for questions, and then I've got two more scenarios. We'll stop for questions there. And Alina, I think this is where we're going to cover your question. First of all, the first scenario has to do with facilitating submission and approval of export e-tags and looking at the ISO priority type. So for market participants, we're going to be expecting you to tag several export resources. Again, this is focusing on exports. Export resources as firm provisional energy, GFP. And you're going to put in the priority types of RT-Econ, RT-LPT, and DAHAT-LPT on those tags. Then you also would, just to test, might want to put in some other tags that are not GFP, because there are a lot of other different products, GF, I can't remember other ones, and you want to mark those with other priority types, such as DAHAT-LPT or RT-LPT. What's going to happen is the ISO is going to approve those GFP tags if they have the correct priority types, and operators will verify ITS for those GFPE tags. So that's the first scenario. The second one is quite similar, but this is where we're talking about the denials. And I think this might have been part of the question that you had, which was, again, we're going to ask you to tag several of your resources. You will have already done this from the first scenario, basically the same things. And if you put in incorrect priority types, etc., then you're going to want to verify those e-tags in your system to make sure they were denied, if in fact they should have been. and also the ISO operators are going to be looking at that as well in ITS. So at this point, I will stop for questions. First of all, I see that there is a question from Carl about what does high likelihood of being curtailed mean? I think, Eric, you mentioned something about a high likelihood of being curtailed, and I'm wondering if you want to add some more color to that.
Sure. It's a high likelihood of curtailed. It just means that our operators are going to look at T-20 that we don't have tags that are over their market awards. So you've probably seen it if you've been on the other side of things. It says over market awards as a reason to that, and that's only what I mean. If it's caught, it's going to show up on our system as being over awards, and the action taken is to curtail the tag down to market awards.
Carl, does that help you? All right. Okay, I think Carl has said thank you. So let's see. I don't see any questions about those first two scenarios. Dottie, can you confirm that for me?
Yes, I can confirm that there are no other questions at this time.
Thank you. So now there's two more scenarios. This one is a structured scenario. Excuse me, hold on just a moment. In this scenario, we're going to initiate an EEA3 alert. And before we do that, we're going to, again, if you are on the Market Sim, if you've registered for the Market Sim, you'll get information about when we're going to do this, so that in advance of that, you can submit some tags to see how they will be adjusted in this EEA3 alert. And again, it doesn't have to be an EEA3, but that's what we're going to do to make this happen. And we'll initiate pro-rata curtailments of those LPT exports so you can see how that works. So we're going to ask you to put in several varieties of tags just to see what's going to happen. The expected outcome is we're going to have you verify that what you expected to happen to those tags happened in your own systems, and the ISO operators are also going to verify in ITS that we're getting the result that we expect. Here we go. In the fourth scenario, come on, oops, I think I just clicked on a link. I do not want to open it. Okay. In the fourth scenario, this is just for you to get familiar with what's in ADS and for us to make sure that it is representing the correct information. So we're going to have you with those bids that you submitted. You're also going to want to look at ADS and make sure that those market priorities based on the HASP results are correct, and the ISO operators will do the same. I'm going to stop again for questions, if there are any. I can see that Bethany had a question, wondering if we're going to email the answers to the questions. The answer is yes. This is a great segue. I'm going to be sending out a link to a course evaluation. Additionally, I'll provide additional information answering the questions that have been asked, because we are recording them all, and I may send out the course evaluation beforehand, but we will have a list of all of your email addresses, and we will definitely send out the answers to any of the outstanding questions. Okay, and I see that Dottie put the course evaluation link in the chat, but I'm looking to see if there are any other questions about any of the market sim scenarios or really anything that we talked about today. And I don't see anything. Dottie, do you see anything that I'm missing?
I do not see any hands raised at this time, nor do I see any additional questions in the chat.
Thanks, Dottie. All right, so wrap up and resources. So what do you need
Cindy?
to do? What? Oh,
I did see one hand. Yep, one hand just went up.
Yep.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. What's your question?
Yeah, I hope this question, I hope I read it correctly. So looks like all the scenarios are unstructured, or actually the EE3 one has to be structured, right? Because that,
Yeah.
okay. All right. That
Yep, that
totally
one is
misread it.
structured.
Thank you.
And I believe that the scenarios, I'm not sure if they've been updated on the release planning page. They may have been, but I know there were some adjustments that needed to be made to those. So if you look at them in the data's kind of a while ago, I know that Anshuman is planning on updating those and putting out the updated scenarios. So, and my examples should align with any updated scenarios. So that is the latest information. Let's see. Ken, you had a question.
Hi, I've got a question more on the capacity, the exemption, the failed to start rule or whatever.
Yep.
We actually tried to put it in back in September when we first released the RSEE phase 2 stuff. And we're kind of a unique utility that updates our forbidden regions every week. And so there was a kind of a mistake where, you know, when we downloaded the new form from to get the new GRDT, it didn't have the changes in there. My question is, when will that background or the behind the scenes effort of, you know, people who have hydro resources, when will that go away to where we have to start using the flag yes in the GRDTs? Is that coming up at the end of this month, or is that something that's on the horizon here?
So if you are already signed up for the exemption to the rule, we will, when RSEE phase 2 track 2 goes live, you won't have to do anything. We're already going to update that for you. If you are a customer that doesn't currently have that exemption and want it, once RSEE phase 2 track 2 goes live, we are going to, then that GRDT will be available, and then you can do that from there. That is my understanding.
Okay, so just confirming, it's not something that if we can get it in the next couple of GRDTs and flag it in, we should be good before the behind the scenes effort of, you know, automatically adding hydro resources that qualify to this exemption. Before that goes away, we should be good, right, to update within the next couple of weeks here and be okay.
So just to be clear, we're not automatically adding all the hydro resources. There are some folks that asked for this exemption previously, and we did a manual workaround to get them to make sure that they were exempt because they qualified for that. That's what kind of prompted us to say, well, maybe we should put something in the RDT. So for folks who already have that exemption, they don't have to do anything. But if you do not already have that exemption and you want it, once RSEE phase 2 track 2 goes live, you will need to update your GRDT to request that. Does that make sense?
Kinda, except that sometimes the default flag is no. So it almost seems like if you already had it provisioned because you were requested behind the scenes, and then RSEE phase 2 went live, that it would start using the default flags in the GRDT and overwrite your previous condition, right?
My understanding is that for those that already have it, we're going to change it to a Y, but I will confirm that.
Thank you much.
Mm-hmm. All right, I don't see any other questions, but so let me finish up here and then we'll see if there's any final questions. So participate in the market sim. I'm highly encouraging you to do that. And use the ADS instruction type in map stage and in production. Make sure it's working right in map stage, and then you're going to be able to see that in production. Again, those 2 new CMRI reports will be available in map stage and when we go into production. Want to make sure, and this is probably the most important, is tagging your awards correctly and completely, which you should be doing today. anyway, and then if, as we were just talking about, once we go into production, if you're interested and eligible for that failed to start exemption, use the GRDT to request that. I'm going to stop once more for questions, but I'm not seeing any. So just moving on, I did mention earlier about we have some reference links. There was a question about whether it had to be an EEA3 in order to be adjusted. I know that in this bottom link, the frequently asked questions on export schedules and scheduling priorities, there's lots of great information in there about what we mean about all of these different qualifications and rules and so forth. And I'm pretty sure that I remember seeing that one was in there. So you'll want to take a look at that. All of these links are really helpful for understanding the background to the information that I'm presenting today. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, I am going to send you a link to SurveyMonkey, and I believe Dottie already put that into the chat. So if you get a chance, please fill that out. It really helps us improve our future training, what I could do better, what our how our materials could be improved. Also, if you think things are terrific, we'll take good comments as well. So please let us know that also. And I thank you. I'll stop one more time, last time, just to see if there's questions, and then we can sign off for the day. I am not seeing anything, Dottie.
I do not see any questions as well, so I'll pass it back to you.
All right. Thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.